Hello, I'm Helen Widener, and I am going to show you how to make old-fashioned English toffee. The English toffee that was taught to me by an aunt who was taught by her mother and in turn was taught by her mother. So this is a passed down recipe that I'm sharing, and so my children want to make sure that it stays in the family, and I don't mind sharing it. So I hope that you enjoy the cooking. The first thing we have to do in making the toffee, I have a nice stack of almonds here that are sliced, and I actually prefer just having the little bit of the shell on the, or not the shell, but the outside of the almond showing. And we have a chocolate chips. I like to use the dark semi-sweet chocolate chips, whichever you prefer. This cup is partially chopped. We'll only be using probably less than a cup, but you want to just go ahead and chop the whole thing. We have a cup of sugar. We're going to be using just about a cup of sliced almonds, but we're going to go ahead and toast the whole package. We're also going to need 2 sticks of butter. So the basic ingredient, the only 2 ingredients of the actual toffee itself that's going to be cooked is 1 cup of sugar and 2 sticks of butter. And it must be fresh, sweet cream butter. No additives, or your candy is going to fail. So we will start by pouring all of the almonds into this pan. This is what I use as a roasting pan. It's nice and large, so it lets me spread the almonds out, and which will make it a little bit faster. Now, one thing about the cooking the almonds, I'm making my oven temperature 400 degrees, so that's going to be kind of hot. And we're just going to kind of spread these out a little bit like this, and we're going to put them in the oven, and we're going to watch them very close because it won't take but about 10 minutes. So we're just going to wait a few minutes, and then we will continue with the process. I can smell the almonds roasting, and I think they're just about done. So let me see, and I can take them out of the oven. Yeah, we got some nice golden color here, and they smell heavenly. We're going to let these set and cool off a few minutes, and then I'm going to crush them with my hands. In the meantime, let's start with our preparing the other pan we have here that we're actually going to layer the toffee in. So let me just grab a couple of sticks of butter. We're just going to take a little bit of the paper off the end of one of them, and we're going to butter our pan really good because we want to be able to get the toffee out of the pan when we get through cooking it and layering it. So we're just going to just put a nice little layer of butter on this pan. I'm going to lay that over here in this pan. Just get rid of the trash a little bit as I go along. And I'm going to take this large cup of chocolate chips that have been partially chopped, and I'm going to put them in my chopper, and we're going to chop them just a little bit more. We're going to only need, we're probably going to need less than a cup of chips. I think these are probably chopped good enough for them. You don't have to powder them, but get them a little bit smaller than what they are. And we're just going to take them out and we're going to set them over here by the pan. Now I'm going to check my almonds a little bit and see if they've cooled up enough so that I can just kind of begin to crush them with my hands, and they're still pretty warm. So while those are cooling a little bit more, I'm going to put my butter in the pan that I'll be cooking the toffee in, and it's going to take 2 of these quarter-pound sticks, so half a pound of butter. And I'm just going to go through and I'm just going to make them a little bit smaller so they melt a little bit faster with the sugar by slicing them up into little chunks. And I'm going to pour 1 cup of sugar over the butter. And I'm going to set it over on the stove, but I don't have the flame on yet because I need to continue preparing the pan to put the toffee on because it comes off. It's really, really hot. I like to have some good size chips. I don't want them too fine, like powder. That you just don't get the nice taste of the nut in it if it's too fine. So this is kind of the way I like to just do it with my hand, so that way that it doesn't over process them. And then I just take and I start layering them on the bottom of the pan on top of the butter, and we want to cover it pretty thoroughly. Like I said, I love lots of almonds on my toffee. Okay, I think that's probably enough almonds, so I'm going to take the chips that I've been working on here, and I'm just going to spread these chips over the top of the chocolate chips over the top of the almonds. And the toffee is going to be really hot when I pour it on, so it's just going to melt this chocolate right into the nuts that will hold them in place. And we don't want to do too heavy on the chocolate, but because then you'd lose the nice taste of the toffee. So, but we want to have enough because chocolate is good. Chocolate is a good thing. Okay, I think we have enough chips on that to make a nice layer of chocolate. So our next process is to actually go over and begin to cook the toffee. Let's just turn on the stove on high. The reason I'm starting it on high is just so that we want the butter and the sugar to melt and to meld together. And so this is the reason we started on high. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the heat up high so that the butter melts and it mixes and with the sugar, and we want the sugar to melt into the butter and begin a chemical reaction to make the toffee. And as we go along, I will explain the different chemical changes that the butter and the sugar undergo in order to make a crunchy toffee instead of a hard toffee. For instance, if I was making toffee and I was bringing it up to the hard candy temperature, then this particular type of candy is going to come out kind of hard. Well, we don't want the toffee to be hard. We want you to be able to just bite into it and it just fall apart in your mouth. And so that's the whole process, or the whole thing about an English toffee, a good English toffee that's made in small batches. It's just that you just want it to melt in your mouth, and it gets very addictive. And you can see the butter is really beginning to melt, and when it gets to the stage where it's making its first chemical change, then I'll show you and explain the change in what it's doing. One thing about making toffee is that when you get the butter and the sugar and it begins to brown and it begins to really bubble, and it's extremely hot. So you want to be very careful not to splash it on you. So when you're stirring it, just, you know, be real careful with it. And if something does maybe go a little bit wrong and you get a little bit too hot, I usually keep a lid in hand so that I can just put it over the pan and cut off any hazard of fire in the kitchen. Now we want all of this sugar and butter to be melded together. We don't want it separating, which it kind of looks like this is trying to do. This is a pretty long process of stirring, and you have to stir it constantly. There's not even one moment that you cannot be watching the cooking of the sugar and the butter. It's a constant watching, a constant stirring. And this one is the importance of having a good fresh butter is that you don't want it to be separating during the process. And this butter is trying to separate on us. So I'm going to try to work it in and without spoiling it. But it's possible that we're going to have a ruined batch. Now I'm lowering the heat on this a little bit so that I don't, it's not going to try to separate on me quite as much. And if you're noticing, it's getting a nice foamy look to it right now. And this little bit of white foam, it kind of reminds me of sea foam. And so I call this stage a sea foam stage. And so that gets the butter and the sugar all melded together. And we're going to give it just a little bit more time. And then I'll be going into the second phase of the cooking, which is a crucial point, or then it will just be hard candy. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the fire, and this is a gas range, so it's easier to lower the heat. And I'm going to turn it down to a low, and I'm going to just continue to stir this mixture. And what it's going to do, it's going to start cooling off. And as it cools off, then the mixture begins to get thicker. So what I call this is like a tempering stage. And I will show you in just a moment when it begins to roll around the pan and kind of separate when you're putting the spoon through it, and it's not quite so liquid as before. And what I call this stage that we're going into now is the rubber stage, because it kind of gets a rubbery feel to it. If you can see, when I'm moving the spoon around, it's kind of separating on me and kind of clinging to the sides, and so you want a nice little rubbery feel here to it. It's thick, it's hard to stir, and we just keep going with this until we've kind of got it tempered well. And see, we're getting a lot of, when we stir it around, we're getting a little show of the pan underneath, so we know that it's getting into a real nice rubbery stage for us. Now I think this is probably cooled off just enough. We've gotten just enough rubber to it that I'm going to turn the heat back up again, and I'm going to turn it up pretty much to high. You just kind of have to watch it. This is a really crucial part of the process of making the toffee. So what we're going to do is bring the heat back up to this. Since the butter and the sugar is all melded together now, then we can get a nice liquid that's pourable, and we'll get the nice brown color that's the toffee and makes the toffee. So this is going to be a delicious pan of toffee here in just a few minutes. And always make sure you have your hot pads handy, because things do get hot. This handle happens to not be getting hot, so that's lucky for me that I don't have to have a hot pad in my hand while I'm cooking it. But I can feel the heat coming up to the spoon, even though it has a handle on it. I can still feel the heat from the pan. So. We're going to start seeing a little bit of color right now. It's going to be a little bit gradual, and then it'll start, as it gets a more liquid, then it starts faster and turning a lot faster. So then that's when you really have to be on the watch out, because that's when you're in the most danger of burning the toffee. And if you burn the toffee, see, we're beginning to get just a little bit of nice golden color there. So when the toffee is a nice, beautiful toffee color, then we're going to know it's ready. It's not a difficult candy to make, actually. It's just a matter of knowing the process and the steps that you have to take to make it to where it's not going to break your teeth when you bite into it. So you can already see we're getting a lot more of the golden color that's coming in, and so and it's beginning to cling to the pan just a little bit, so we want to watch that part so that it doesn't, so it doesn't start sticking and burning. You can maybe let it will stick a little bit, but if it sticks too much, then you're going to start getting a bitter taste to it, and we don't want that. This is a type of candy that it just can't be rushed. It can't be slowed down too much. You just sort of have to do an almost perfect synchronization of the heat and the melting of the butter and the melding of the sugar and the butter to get it all to come out right. But with just a little bit of practice, maybe you might ruin the first batch. Don't worry about it. Just go and do another one. Now it's getting a lot ready. It's not quite thin enough to pour yet, but as you can see that it's heating up around the edges and they're getting brown, so we want to keep that moving into the center so we can have fresh mixture around the sides, and we just don't want this to burn. And it's really getting a nice pretty color already, but it's not quite there yet. Because it's almost ready to pour up, so we're just going to keep working with this. Now this is extremely hot, as I told you, so you're going to want to have your pan over here as close to you as you can get it. So when you start pouring, you can just pour it right out of the pan. And it's getting a little thinner now, as you can see. So it's getting close to the point where it's actually going to be thin enough to pour it up. Doesn't that look yummy? Have you ever seen such a beautiful caramel color? And let's just take it up right now. And we're going to pour it out over this pan. And I'm just going to And I'm going to turn the fire off, which is pretty warm. And I'm just going to put this over in the sink and put a little bit of soap in it and a little bit of hot water and let it set. Now we're going to take just a regular spoon and we're going to start. The toffee is very hot still, and we're just going to kind of smooth it over to the edges a little bit here, like this, so that we have a nice pan full. We don't want to drag hard enough that we drag the chocolate underneath into the toffee. We're just kind of barely moving, kind of just pulling it over a little bit here. And if you don't get all the way over to the edges, it doesn't make any difference. You'll still have the same amount of candy. And I think that's going to do. Now we're going to take some more of our chocolate, and I'm going to take another spoon. Here, let's take this, it's a little bit finer. And we're just going to spread this out. So this is actually the fourth layer of the toffee. Okay, what I'm going to do now is just take a little piece of foil, and I'm going to lay it over the pan so that it'll hold the heat in, and we can melt this chocolate, and I can spread it out. And we're just going to let this set for about 3 minutes. I'm going to just take this, ooh, boy, I believe it is melting. I think I left that on there long enough. So we're just going to take a spoon and just kind of melt this, spread it out and even it out a little bit, and make a nice coat of chocolate on top of the toffee. And then we're going to come in and we'll put our almonds on, which will give us a nice little sandwich of chocolate with almonds and toffee in the center. So that melted just really, really well. And we're just going to take some more almonds, just, you know, handfuls of them, and just sprinkle them over the top. It. And even though this is melted on here, I'm going to go ahead and use this because we don't want to waste the chocolate. And I'm just going to press this down on the top of the pan. Just still a little warm, but it's not too bad. And I'm going to press it here, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, and we're going to wait about an hour, and then this toffee is going to be ready. Here we are back again, and it's time to take the candy out and check it out. So just give me a moment, and I will get it out of the fridge. Now let's just take this off and see what has happened. Well, we saved a little bit of chocolate from the top of the foil, so we're just going to loosen it up a little bit here on the edge, and it is hard.
Okay.
Yeah, we just do one little bit here so we can get it started. Sometimes you need to just let it set a few minutes and soften up just a little bit, but we're in a hurry. There, oh, yum. And who's going to try the first bite? Well, here, let's pass this around. Mmm. Mmm.
Yummy.
Mmm. So when you get started,
oh my God, look at that. Wow.
And you just break it up into smaller pieces, and that's the way toffee is supposed to be served. Nice little pieces of hand-broken chocolate, toffee, almond toffee.
My God, that's delicious. Wow.
Nice. And all your friends are going to love you when you learn to make this. It's a favorite Christmas candy of mine. And you'll definitely want to get on the list.